Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Megan. I'm a BACP registered therapist in the UK and I work with women, supporting them in pregnancy and postpartum. And one of the common areas that I work with clients in is helping them to overcome difficult birth experiences. So that's what we're going to look at more in today's video and also in the next video that I publish. This week we'll look at what birth trauma are, what PTSD related to birth is, and we'll also look more at common things that you may be experiencing if you've experienced a difficult birth, and also why you may be experiencing those things. And then in my next video we'll look more at ways that you can heal and overcome a difficult birth. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, and you can also subscribe to my channel for more content on maternal mental health. Okay, so starting to look at this topic, the first thing I just want to touch upon is how common difficult birth experiences are. So the stats tell us that at least 1 in 4 women feel impacted by their birth experience and are left feeling distressed after the birth. And often a misconception around birth trauma is that in order for birth to be traumatic, there has to be a huge medical emergency or intervention take place. But this actually isn't the case. Actually, what we know and what we experience is that most people who are left feeling impacted by their birth do so because of how they were treated and how they felt about how they were treated, rather than the actual procedures or the actual process of the birth. So really common experiences that leave an impact on people are things like feeling judged or dismissed, feeling out of control, feeling like your preferences or your wishes aren't asked or listened to, feeling judged, feeling diminished, or there being disrespectful language used towards you. So these experiences, as you can see, are more about the way you were treated and how that's left you feeling, rather than the actual scenario of the birth. And with birth trauma, there's no one else apart from you that can label or define something as being birth trauma or not being birth trauma. It's a completely subjective experience. So if you feel like you've been impacted by your birth, if you feel like you're left distressed and it's impacted your life in a way which is negative and had a lasting impact, then that is defined as birth trauma from your experience. Another term that you may have heard is PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is a term that's used not just related to difficult birth experiences, but to any traumatic event that can happen in life, and across any stage of life. And the difference here between birth trauma and PTSD is that PTSD is a medically diagnosed disorder. And in order to get a diagnosis of PTSD, certain criteria have to be met for PTSD to be assigned. But what I'd like to point out here is that what you're experiencing, the impact of what you're experiencing, the impact of your birth, may not reach that diagnosis criteria for PTSD, but that in no way doesn't mean that your experience isn't relevant, it isn't valid, and it doesn't deserve support, it doesn't deserve understanding, and for you to be able to work to overcome it. PTSD is just a label of these set of circumstances, but birth trauma is something that is subjective to you. So it's only relevant what you are experiencing. And yeah, it's absolutely valid whether it meets the criteria for PTSD or not. So after a difficult birth, it may be days, weeks, months, or even years afterwards that you feel the effects of that experience. And just to point out here that it's never too late to address a difficult birth experience. Even if it's been years since the birth, it's absolutely valid to still come back and look at that further. And A difficult birth can go on to impact people in many different ways, but in this video we're going to be looking at 6 of the common ways that you may find is impacting you. And the first one that you may be experiencing is that the birth is causing you to have flashbacks or intrusive memories or nightmares of the experience, and that you may feel like you're back in the traumatic experience in some way. And here we can just briefly go over what happens during a traumatic experience internally in the mind in order just to understand why that happens. So normally if we're going about life, when we're experiencing different scenarios, the brain works in order to categorise those experiences away in sort of an orderly fashion. And therefore we can retrieve those memories when we need or want to. So for example, if we've got a memory of cooking a certain meal, that will be sort of stored, if you like, with using the analogy, in a suitable place in the filing cabinet. And then when we come back to make that meal again, we may take that memory out and be able to retrieve the memory so we can use it in the present moment. But when we're in a traumatic event, our mind goes into survival mode. And what this means is that all the non-essential parts of the brain go offline, and only the parts of the brain which help to keep us surviving and keep us safe in that moment stay online. And what this means is that the filing cabinet system in our brain can't work like it normally does. So the memories get stored in a fragmented way, and they don't get stored in an organised way. So this means that rather than being able to access them in the same way that we would, say for example, we're cooking a meal, we're pulling back on the previous recipe, instead what happens is the memories get activated at inconvenient times, at times out of our control, and we will often experience the traumatic scenario in fragments and in a way that feels like it's happening in the present moment. And this brings us on to another really common symptom, which is experiencing really high anxiety. So you may experience this with physical symptoms like increased breathing, heart rate, dizziness, feelings of sickness. You may also experience it with really anxious thoughts, rumination patterns. And this is really common after a traumatic event, because what we can imagine is that after we've gone through something traumatic, our brain is really sensitive, and even more sensitive than normal, to threat and danger. So it's really on the lookout for any other potential dangerous or threatening situations, and therefore it can kind of signal like a false alarm. You know, it can notice things in the environment which aren't necessarily dangerous, but our brain is sort of sitting on the side of being overly cautious after a traumatic event. Similarly, with our brain trying to keep us safe after a traumatic event, what will often happen is that the brain will tend to try and get us to avoid any situations or conversations or places or people that we may feel are linked to the trauma, in order to try and protect us from any future danger. And this becomes really challenging as well around birth trauma, because it's really different than most other traumas that people experience in life, because although you've gone through something traumatic, often at the other end of that, first of all, you're just thrown into the deep ends of motherhood and you're just running 100 miles an hour trying to keep on top of that. But also people are often treating you with joy, celebration. There can often be those unhelpful helpful comments around, like, at least you're safe, at least your baby's safe. And the focus can be on those aspects. And that can lead to the aspects of the traumatic experience that you're feeling the impacts of being sort of covered over by that. And also what can be really common here is that you may feel that you want to avoid any of those situations and people and so on, to avoid the topic of birth coming up. But then that can lead to a spiral of feeling isolated, from the people, the things, the places you normally like going to. And another complexity here that can often come up is that in that you may also want or be feeling like you want to avoid your baby, because after all, your baby is linked to the birth experience, and this can be such a challenging experience for people to go through. But really what I want to emphasize here is that what's going on there is your brain is trying to keep you safe. It's no reflection on how good a mother you are, how much you love your baby. It's none of that. It's just your brain doing its natural process of trying to get you to avoid anything linked to the traumatic experience. But as we'll touch upon more in the next video, overcoming that is possible, and being able to reintroduce yourself and reintroduce yourself back into the situations and conversations and being around your baby more, all of those things are absolutely possible. So another really common thing that mums can experience is blaming themselves for their birth experience. And what can often happen here, as with so many aspects of motherhood, is that I think there are so many narratives and expectations around how birth could or should look, and what can happen there is that it can really easily activate that part of our brain that is easily self-critical, and it can leave you feeling that if things weren't the way you hoped for, that the failure there must be with you. And really common thoughts that can happen here are things like, if only I'd prepared more, or if only I'd advocated for myself or asked for my wishes clearer, or if only I was stronger, then this birth experience wouldn't have happened. And the problem, apart from the distress that all this self-critical thoughts can create, is it also just adds more anxiety and more of a threat state in our body and our mind, and it just adds another layer of difficulty to what you're already experiencing after a difficult birth experience. Also often what can come with that feelings of guilt and shame and self-criticism is the desire to isolate, and you may find yourself wanting to isolate again further from other new mums or from family or whoever it might be. So as we'll come to see in the other in the next video, it's about unpicking those beliefs and also learning to relate to yourself in a more compassionate and understanding way, so you're not left with self-blame on top of all the other stuff that you're dealing with. So the final point for this video is how a difficult birth can leave you questioning about your future family plans. So if you're someone who previously wanted more than one child, a difficult birth can leave you feeling like you no longer want any more children. And again, it comes back to that way that our brain's trying to protect us. Our brain's trying to keep us away from any situations which it perceives as a potential threat. And with this point, it's about, or sort of naturally through working through the traumatic birth, overcoming the impacts of that birth, it's about them being left in a place where you feel like you can make the best next decision for you and your family, rather than feeling like it's the fear and it's the impact of the trauma making the decision for you. So there are ways for this video of how you may be left feeling impacted from a difficult birth, and in my next video I'll be covering ways that you can come to heal from a difficult birth, so make sure to come back and check that out. And just before we finish for the video today, you may just want to take a moment to check in with yourself. This can be a topic which can bring up so many emotions. It can feel completely overwhelming to come and look at this topic and visit these things. So you may just want to take a few deep breaths in the stomach, nice long exhales, and just remind yourself that in this moment you are safe, and ground yourself in this present moment before you move on with whatever comes next in your day. And that's it for today. If you have any comments, I'd love to read those below, and don't forget to like if you've enjoyed the video, and subscribe for more videos on maternal mental health from me, perinatal therapist. Take care. Bye bye.